Gregory Offner. I really enjoyed talking to Greg. He's a disruption expert. Where and how does disruption play a role in your life? Are you continuing doing things that are easy, or do you need disruption to make small changes? He talks very much about how important that is in your personal and your professional life. And his take on discipline is very interesting. He went to military school and he really kind of bucked the system for a long time, and he got punished, and eventually when he just followed it and high dividends paid off. He graduated very high in his class. I believe it was top. He's a musician. He's a dueling pianist. He had 15 surgeries, on his vocal cords. Fascinating story from Greg. And now he speaks to business leaders, to workshops, at events, public speaking, all on disruption. He has something called the performance agreement, where he believes that employees shouldn't just be trained, but people should as well. Fascinating conversation. You're going to learn a lot about disruption and how necessary it is in your life, and perhaps why you may need more incrementally. But I really enjoyed talking to Greg. I know you will as well. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Start this right
That
away.
that's the nicest F word I've been called today.
Is, is that right? Oh, you Philly guys get called great things. Well, who are you kidding? Gregory Offner, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited to talk to you. So, how important is disruption?
It's incredibly important. It's what life is built on. Disruption, and it's important that we define disruption
Mm,
if we're gonna talk about it, because the biggest surprise I got when I first started in this space, helping organizations and the leaders within them create disruption and even thrive amidst disruption. The biggest surprise, Joe, was understanding that most people couldn't or didn't have a definition of disruption. They couldn't
mm.
define disruption when I asked them. They kind of knew it when they saw it, but they couldn't create it because they couldn't define it. So we define disruption as a change that sustains and sets a new standard. And so in many ways, disruption, change in and of itself, is what life is built on. I mean, we breathe in, we breathe out. That's a change. Oxygen enters our lungs, it exits our lungs. The minute we stop growing, the minute we stop changing, it's really the minute we die.
Hmm. It's a really important lesson. I mean, one of the main reasons why I love to talk to people like yourself is to constantly learn and to constantly grow. And even I remember when working out, I don't do CrossFit anymore. I got hurt, but still, it was like memory disruption or muscle disruption. They kept on emphasizing, and it's real important in everything we do in life.
Yeah, muscle memory, and the example of the gym is a good one because what creates the change in our body is this process of tension and release. lifting heavy things, putting heavy things down, as some people say.
Hmm.
And so finding that in our personal and our professional lives, tension and release is a really, really important concept, Joe, because there are too many jobs who have a whole lot of tension, yeah, and no release. We kind of think of those as dead end jobs. And then there are too many people whose lives consist of a whole lot of release. They're not really pushing themselves. They're just kind of avoiding loss instead of pursuing gain. They're doing just enough to get by, but not enough that they're really feeling fulfilled. And so, too much of either tension or release can be toxic for us. But when we balance them out, when we use them in harmony, in concert with each other, when we use them together effectively, we not only feel fulfilled, we feel better about our life, about our job, about where we're going in the world, but we find we're more successful. Because just like at the gym, a little bit of muscle growth paves the way for a little more muscle growth,
Hmm.
for a little more. And the next thing you know, you've got biceps that are rivaling Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Hmm.
right? Maybe in his heyday, maybe not now.
Right. I was half hoping, Greg, that you'd have a keyboard with you. You have a very fascinating. You're a dueling pianist. You had voice surgery. I mean, you were singing hours a night at your shows, and about 15 voice surgeries.
Yeah. And that's a pretty unique thing for someone who's a vocal professional to have
Mm.
that many, to have voice surgery in and of itself is fairly unique. Most people don't even understand what that is or what it looks like or why it happens. But then to go on and need to have 15 is fairly unique. It may be the most, I haven't checked and I don't really care to have some kind of record here, but it may be the most of any singing professional that they've had to have. So it started because I ignored subtle signs of disruption.
Mm.
I wrote them off. I wasn't paying attention to them. And over time, those small, what I'll call micro disruptions, built up into a massive disruption that
Hmm.
nearly caused me to lose my voice forever. And in 2015, when doctors discovered how badly damaged my vocal cords were, they gave me an option. They said you can do nothing, and in 2 weeks to 2 months, you'll lose complete vocal function.
Wow.
You'll experience what they call vocal fold paralysis, permanent vocal fold paralysis, or you can undergo surgery. The recovery time is about 6 to 8 months
Wow.
before you're able to start speaking, conversing like you do right now, which is
Hmm.
which is your choice, Greg. And so I'm sitting there in this doctor's office, sort of facing door A, which is lose my voice forever. Door B, undergo surgery, not able to talk for 6 to 8 months, probably lose my day job. In sales, you sort of need to be able to talk
A little bit.
to keep your job going. Was definitely losing the opportunity to be a professional dueling piano player, a professional singer anymore. They didn't even think I'd get a singing voice back.
Wow.
Even if surgery were successful, they thought that my voice as I knew it was probably toast. And so I did what a lot of people start to do when they're facing a critical diagnosis. I mean, for me, that was a death-like experience. The doctor may as well have came in and told me, "Hey, you've got cancer. You've got a couple months to live." That's how
Hmm.
I felt. I started bargaining. I started thinking of compromise. And I said, "Well, doc, what if we didn't do the full surgery? What if we did say just a portion, just enough
Wow.
to maybe get me healthy to where I'm not continuing to beat my vocal cords up so bad that I'm going to lose the ability to speak forever? What if?" And he said, "Yeah, that's an option. Not sure what the outcome's going to look like, but if that's what you want to do, that's certainly an option we can pursue." And that's what I chose because in that moment, I was worried about losing, not gaining. I was worried about losing that income that I had during the day,
Mm.
not gaining the ability to use my voice fully as quickly as possible. And because I made that compromise, instead of having 2 or 3 surgeries needed to finish the process, we did smaller surgeries over the course of 5 years. I wound up needing 13 surgeries on my vocal cords
Wow.
and 2 surgeries to completely rebuild a valve in my stomach. One of the causes of a lot of voice issues for people is undiagnosed reflux, bad acid reflux.
Hmm.
And so they had to fix my stomach valve before any of the vocal surgeries could really be permanent. But that's been the process I've been dealing with, Joe, for the better part of a decade. And it's what inspired me
Wow.
to leave the job I had, the work I was doing for the work that I do now, which is as a keynote speaker. I get to talk to audiences all over the world on the topic of change, disruption, and the future of work.
What a great story. And would you have been able to speak the way you can now without that major disruption in your life, in your body, in your voice?
So, do you mean the actual way my voice sounds?
No, I mean the actual experience of facing that decision, and I mean, it's a major shift in what you're doing, and it's a you started bargaining. It's a milestone in your life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It was a fundamental moment for me,
Hmm.
without which I would not have had the motivation to
Right.
do what I do now. I certainly would have had the ability. We all have the ability to do what I did. I'm not special, but for some reason, real change, real perspective shift seems to require a catalyst. And in many cases, in much of the research I've done, I found that that catalyst is trauma, is crisis,
Right.
is loss. That's unfortunate because that means that there are thousands of people, I'd say even millions of people that are out there, maybe some listening to this right now, who want or at least believe they want to make a change in their life, but won't. They tell themselves they can't. I know this because that's what I told myself. I got too many things going on. This job pays too well. I got too many obligations. People expect this or that of me. I can't. The truth is, we can. We just choose not to
Mm.
because disrupting the status quo until we have to, well, that requires a trade off, requires sacrifice. And most of us aren't willing. I know I certainly wasn't. We're not willing to make those sacrifices unless we absolutely have to. And that's why I say it's unfortunate that most true change comes as a result of loss or of crisis or of trauma.
And so instead of feeling sorry for yourself and going into depression and going inward, I mean, not only do you turn it around, you help others, you're helping businesses, you're publicly speaking. It's amazing to me that people like yourself do that. I'm not sure. I lost a lot of weight, and that was a crisis moment. I got myself to 340 pounds. The doctor says you're not going to see your daughter graduate, you're not going to be around, and that was a crisis point for me. Once the look into my daughter's eyes and the thought of not seeing her again. So, I turned that around, but it took me a long time to start telling people about it, through this podcast. But somebody like yourself, to turn that around and to try to help others and help businesses, what is that? What's inside you that made you do that, Greg?
Well, one, it's important to understand that I went through depression. I,
Hmm.
I mean, I went through the pity party. I went through all that stuff.
Did you?
Yeah, this was, I am not going to take credit for something that didn't happen. This was not a simple transition. There was a lot
Hmm.
of crying, self doubt, bargaining, reckoning with beliefs I had created, belief structures I had created over the course of my life that I
Hmm.
thought were helping me. But in reality, they were these walls, metaphorical walls that I'd built up around me to protect myself from failing at what I really wanted. The Jim Carrey quote that some of your listeners might be familiar with, I remember it as, you can fail at things you don't care about too, so you may as well try something you care about.
Hmm.
He was talking to a group of college graduates about, how to pursue passion in their career. That's always stuck with me because my professional career prior to what I do now, the work I did in sales and insurance and marketing and human capital management, they were the jobs were fine. In fact, in some cases the pay was better than fine for
Hmm.
what I did. But it didn't fulfill me. I didn't feel like what I was doing, the time, 8 hours on a easy day, sometimes 12 and 14-hour days that I was working, I didn't feel like that was what I was fully capable of doing. I
Hmm.
always felt that I was able to make more of an impact that I believed mattered. And so what I do now certainly ticks that box for me. And so that was a real push for me in terms of motivation that that making this pivot would allow me to, I believe, fulfill more of my true potential. But I always wanted to help people. Coming out of high school and going into college, I was pretty certain that I wanted to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher, and I saw the impact she had on the lives of kids throughout our community. But then I started to sour on the idea as teaching got more political, and certainly, I grew up in the
Mm.
mid '80s, so the whole position of a teacher in society really radically changed through the '90s, and so I didn't feel like that suited me. But
Hmm.
I was always interested in teaching and in helping others, and I loved seeing the aha moment in someone's eyes when they finally get a concept. And music has always been an important part of my life. So I knew that I wanted to involve music in what I did. And the world of international keynote speaker is an interesting one.
Hmm.
There are athletes who are household names who do what I do. There are amazing individuals who have, served our country in various capacities, some of whom are heroes that go on stage and talk just like I do. Um, there are folks who suffering a voice loss, gosh, it makes what they've gone through, you know, makes me look like a walk in the park. Some of the folks that get up on stage that speak that, they have no arms, no legs. I mean, there's amazing stories that get put up there. I never thought that I could be one of those people. That was a limiting belief. But being able to integrate music with my life experience and with my professional background actually is quite a unique experience for the audiences. And so in a way, I've found my own path up onto that stage. I didn't have to climb Mount Everest. I
Hmm.
didn't have to become, a general in the armed services or anything like that. Um, but the pivot was not easy. It was not as quick as it may seem, in retrospect.
Refreshing to know, but you still did it nonetheless, Greg. One of your great takeaways, you've got such great content on YouTube, Instagram, on the socials, but is to make incremental, make small changes.
Mhm.
Love that.
You brought up the example of weight loss earlier, and I love that you were clear in identifying that it really wasn't because you wanted to lose weight.
Mm,
It wasn't even because the doctor told you you had to lose weight. It was because you couldn't bear to look in your daughter's eyes and think of not getting to do that ever again.
that's right.
That's what I call a root goal. That type of motivation will allow anyone to create incredible change in their life.
Hmm.
But I also know that you didn't, how much weight did you lose? Do you mind sharing?
140.
140. My guess is you didn't do that in a month.
Certainly not.
Right. It takes time, and it's really sexy to put stories of, like sort of fat to fit or like the poorhouse to the penthouse. It's really sexy to put those types
Mm,
of stories on TV, but it does us a disservice, us culturally a disservice, because we start to believe that change happens really fast, and it doesn't. Change happens really slowly. You may notice change one day, but it's been happening. It's been brewing beneath the surface for a while. And I
mm,
bet you put in a lot of hard work, especially in the beginning, to get to a point where that change was noticeable. A lot of folks who go through a weight loss journey, initially, it's actually not helpful to look at the scale. It's more helpful to judge how do you feel?
mm.
Because when you first start building muscle, you actually weigh more. So, what does that have to do with incremental change? Well, any change that we want to make in life, if we try to do it right away, it disrupts everything else we have going on in life to the point where we feel it's unsustainable. So instead, I'm an advocate of making small, sustainable shifts, those micro disruptions I mentioned earlier, and building upon them. Because we often, this is a line from one of my mentors, we often overestimate what we can do in a year and grossly underestimate what we can do in a decade.
Mm.
I think that's the way society, sort of marketing culture is positioned for many of us. So we believe we got to have it now. It's got to be instant.
Hmm.
But that's just not how true sustainable change happens. It's bit by bit. It's deliberate. Change that's not done bit by bit, that's not deliberate, that doesn't last, that's not disruption, that's an interruption. It's kind of like a TV
Hmm.
commercial. We can't wait for it to be over so we can get back to our regularly scheduled program. And so we're frustrated by interruption in our lives. And most people, when they make a New Year's resolution, they're not creating change, they're creating an interruption.
Mm.
I'm going to eat healthy for a week. I'm going to go to the gym until my body's so sore that I don't want to go anymore. When if we just made the effort to sometimes, as, talking about the gym, sometimes I'm having a day and I don't want to go. But even if I go, I step onto that treadmill, I'm there for 2 minutes, and then I go, "You know what? I'm not having it." I went. I maintain the consistency of I go. I may not have a great workout, and very often days I don't have a great workout, but it's going. It's that going to the gym every day, whether it's for 2 minutes or an hour, is part of who I've become.
Mm.
So how do we create change, incremental change in our lives that integrates with who we are? So it's not something we're doing, it's something we're becoming. That's the real magic.
Wow.
And that also applies to organizations. How do they integrate change so that it's a part of who the organization is, not something that they're doing? It's who they're becoming. That's where there's a book I'm reading right now by a philosopher from the early 1900s, and he talks about the difference between nouns and verbs, possession versus action,
Hmm.
and that we need less nouns and more verbs,
Hmm.
less people that want to have things and more people that want to be things. Because there's a limit to what we can have. Some might say there's a limit to how much we should have,
Hmm.
but there's no limit to who we can become.
Wondrous to think. You mentioned organizations and businesses. I have a business. I work with a lot of colleagues and businesses. You have a great take on your performance agreement and how you shouldn't invest in the employee. You should invest in the person. That's a
Mm.
major shift.
It's one that I am excited to bring to organizations and to see more adopt because there are some out there who are doing this right. There are some out there who have realized that we've got new tools in the world of work, and those new tools require new rules.
Hmm.
One of those new rules is that investing in the employee is table stakes. Employees are expecting that if they come to your organization to do a job, you're going to help them do that job better.
Right.
That's an expectation. That's no longer a benefit that we can dangle.
Hmm.
But what people need, what businesses will benefit greatly from, is help in developing themselves as a person. Because we all recognize there are skills that make people successful in life that aren't taught, many of which aren't taught in school. Gratitude, focus, resilience. You can learn them if you try, but they're not taught. They're uncovered. And I think that's a problem. These these shouldn't be skills that are just uncovered for a select few. They should be explained, explored, and available to everyone. And the best source for that opportunity right now is the business world. They businesses collectively around the globe spend $300 billion each year on training and development. If you dig into that statistic, 98% of it is directed towards job specific, like the job that you have now, job specific skill development.
I see.
If we start developing the person, when the person becomes better,
Hmm.
any role they step into benefits. If you've got two accountants that your business is looking to hire, Joe, one of them has next to no emotional intelligence. I mean, socially, they're just dumb as a rock. And the other one has a very high emotional intelligence score. They can pick up on something that might be amiss in a conversation. So instead of plowing through about numbers, they say, "Hey, Joe, let me just back up a second. How you doing, man? How are things going for you?" Hands down, every day of the week and twice on Sunday, the employee who has a higher EQ score is going to be better for the business long term.
Right.
But we spend less than 2% of our money globally training and developing these skills in people.
Hmm.
It just makes no sense to me, Joe.
I recently became a student of martial arts, very, very new at it, and it has nothing to do with my business or what I do, but in some ways, it has everything to do with it. I just wonder if something. It's just discipline, respect. Egos are shut down in there, and that can be so well translated into the business world to help. To your point, if somebody shows a particular interest in one area, why not help move them in that area as well? Even if it's not directly related to their job, but indirectly might be able to help more. It seems so simple, but like you say, the 98% of the training not going towards their job specifically. That's unfortunate.
It is. And part of it seems to be because our brains are wired for energy conservation.
Hmm.
And I talked about this concept of root goal analysis a few minutes ago with you, and where that relates to how our brains are wired is that when most people set goals, they use very fast what Dan Kahneman would call system one thinking. Dan Kahneman is a Nobel-winning economist, and he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he says that most of our thinking, because of the energy conservation our brain is wired for, is very fast. We try to put things into buckets. We want to make generalizations, not because we want to generalize everything, but because it helps us conserve mental energy.
Hmm.
When I know that that flat surface and this flat surface can be generalized as a table, even though one of them is a footstool, I can still put things on it. So generalized, yeah, that could be a table. That helps our brain be more efficient. This stems back from when we had to identify threats in the wilderness very quickly. This is why
Hmm.
our brain developed this capacity to want to put things in buckets. This is safe, this is not safe. We had to generalize for survival. But when it comes to setting goals, if we don't use what Dan Kahneman calls system two thinking, or that slow thinking, that very methodical and deliberate thinking, if we just throw goals out there that sound good, I call them superficial goals, surface level goals. Like, hey, I'm gonna lose weight. And all your friends go, hey, yeah, Joe, good for you. I'm gonna lose weight. Well, why? Do we really dig at the why that's underneath that goal? If we don't, when the sacrifice becomes too great, when your circumstance changes and you can't go to the gym every day, all of a sudden you start to bargain and you make compromises with yourself. And because you didn't identify the root goal, the real reason that you said you wanted to lose weight, you just gave some good goal that said, hey, I'm lose 10 pounds. It's going to be great. Yeah, yeah, Joe, it's going to be great. Then when you don't, you go, well, I didn't care about it that much anyway.
Hmm.
We see this with salespeople who set quotas that there's absolutely no connection. There's no emotional connection to that quota. And so when they don't hit it, it's easy for them to look in the mirror and go, we'll get them next time. It's okay. I didn't really care about it that much anyway. And in the business world, when it comes to the topic of how we train our individuals, the justification for every dollar of training has to be made to someone, a board, an owner, a
Hmm.
boss. It's much more difficult to line item and justify the cost benefit of training in gratitude, resilience, empathy, than it is to say, hey, we're going to teach all our accountants to be better accountants with this accounting training. Sounds good, Bob. Go ahead. Here's the check.
Hmm.
So that's system one versus system two. That's very lazy rationale. And the topic, while we're on this topic of lazy, hourly pay is lazy.
Interesting.
It's why we're seeing a pushback against it in the work world right now, because folks are saying, I'm not going to sell you my life for $7 or $10 or $15 an hour. The workforce that people want to work in is where the employer says, here's what I need done. And the employee says, great, I'm going to go do it. And when it's done, the employee leaves. Might be a metaphorical leaving, because they may be working from home, so they may not actually be anywhere, but they want to get the work done and get on with their life. They don't want to sit on the computer and pretend to work for another 3 or 4 hours
Hmm.
until quitting time at 5 p.m. So we can either create smart goals, not SMART, the old style of goal
Right.
setting. We can create smart goals where the employee knows what needs to be done, or we can continue to see this disengagement, this lack of resilience within our people.
Hmm. That's a very interesting take. So in that case, then commission wouldn't be in order as well as hourly.
I think that more people should be paid like salespeople,
Hmm.
should be paid for production. But that's going to take a lot of work on the part of the employer
Right.
to define, well, what actually do I need produced? How does that work? And of course, there will be some people who still need to be paid hourly. There are some folks who like to be paid hourly. There are some folks, they're not looking to be rock stars, but they're going to be rock steady when
Hmm.
they work for an employer. I worked for one particular company where our receptionist had been there for 20 years. She was rock solid. She didn't want to go anywhere. She didn't want any promotions.
Hmm.
She didn't necessarily want any more work, but she was dependable. That was her thing. Every business needs that cohort. So I'm not saying that everybody, but I'm saying there are many cases where people are goofing off or not fully applying themselves at work because they know that in an 8-hour day, it really only takes 3.5 hours to get their work done.
Mm.
But they also know that they can't get in at 8, be insanely productive for 3.5 hours, and just obviously sit there. You can't put your feet up, pop some popcorn, and watch Netflix. So they show up at 8, then they go for 30 minutes in the cafeteria at the office, go visit desks, talk to friends, come back, do a half hour or so's worth of work, maybe go outside for a smoke break or go take a walk or go take a personal phone call. I mean, we have whole states worth of people who do this every day. This is not an anomalous experience. I can't tell you how many times when I talk about this in front of crowds, so many heads are nodding. It actually scares me sometimes.
Mm.
And this phenomenon is because people are stuck in this hourly pay experience. My dad was a carpenter. And one of the things he told me was that your first day on the job, you learn what speed the crew works at.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter that you can put up 10 sheets of drywall in a certain amount of time. It matters how quick the crew is putting up drywall. And if you move too fast, make everybody else look bad. They don't get paid to complete the job. They get paid hourly. What if we rethought the way we compensated, the way we aligned incentives? I think it's necessary to not only keep people engaged, but to let people perform in a way that allows them to be at their best and helps those around them be at their best too. That's what the performance agreement sets the foundation for in an organization. Performance agreement is about formalizing the unspoken expectations of employee and employer, the ones that lately have sort of fallen off to the side or been ignored entirely.
You mentioned carpentry. I had an uncle that worked at a. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, and there's, you know, engine manufacturers here, and he had that job for 40 years. And when he got there, somebody came up to him and said, okay, this area makes 40 pieces a day. And of course my uncle, an Italian immigrant, said, no, are you kidding me? I could do 100, I could do more. And they said, no, it makes 40 a day. That or whatever the number was, that's what it does. And he learned quickly that everything relies, and that's the way it is, union, etc. You mentioned kind of in passing the old way of measuring goals, SMART, which was specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and timely. I believe you don't
Mhm.
believe in that. You don't like that process anymore.
I'm not saying that there isn't value to it. I just meant in the way I was using the word smart in that moment. I wasn't referring to smart goals as people might think of them.
I
I was
see.
saying that we need to be a little bit more intelligent. What I meant to say was we need to be a little bit more intelligent,
Ah,
apply that system to that sort of deep thinking towards job design to help the employee be more successful, to
mm,
incentivize them because folks want to see the impact of their work. Folks want to know the purpose of their work. And folks want their leaders and the organizations that they work for to remove or to eliminate as much unnecessary friction as possible from the processes they use at work. So those are the three categories:
hmm,
purpose, impact, and process. When organizations get those three right, when you have leaders that are friction hunters, they see their chief job is to remove obstacles for the people that report to them, you have very successful teams.
hmm,
When you have individuals that are deeply connected with the purpose of their work or are passionate about the impact of the work that they do, and those two are a little bit different, I'll explain why, you have wildly successful individuals there. And so purpose is the cause, but purpose is the cause, but impact is the outcome.
hmm,
Impact is the outcome of your work. And I tell people, I prioritized income for the beginning of my career. And I wound up doing okay financially, but pretty poor from a fulfillment standpoint.
mm.
And it may not matter in your early 20s. I know it didn't matter to me. The money was great. That
Sure.
was that was everything that mattered at
Mine
that age.
too.
But as you
Yeah.
get a little older, you start to realize that you only have a certain amount of hours in a day. If you're not passionate about how they're being spent, it's really difficult for any amount of money to replace that. So I counsel people that if you chase impact, income will follow. Eventually, income will follow if you're chasing impact.
Hmm. Think about that for a second. And how do you help? You facilitate leaders, and not only do you public speak, but you facilitate leaders. And how do you help them? And who's a perfect candidate for that?
So, speaking and facilitating, they're, sort of like six of one, half dozen of the other. It's just
Synonymous.
a larger crowd when I'm speaking generally. When I'm facilitating, it's more intimate, somewhat like a workshop or a corporate
Mm,
trainer. But any organization that's approaching change, in the midst of change, or has just gone through change, they're a great candidate for me to work with. And specifically in the financial services sector and hospitality right now, they're sort of my two biggest industry
mm,
chunks of clients. But I've worked with technology companies, pharmaceutical companies. This is a belief system, if you will, the performance agreement. It's a way of thinking about work and the future of work that I believe everyone needs to get on board with, or they're going to find themselves left behind.
hmm. In the podcast, people, I lost a lot of weight as I mentioned, and people ask me, how'd you do it? Like there's some kind of silver bullet, or and there's not, of course. But I said just discipline. I focused. I understood what I needed, and just took discipline. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life and what you've been through.
And isn't it funny how nobody wants to hear that answer, Joe? They're like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, but just give me one thing. Come on, I know, yeah, discipline, consistency, yeah, yeah, okay, 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 but give
true.
me one thing.
I get a lot of pushback. Yeah,
Everybody wants that answer.
yeah.
Discipline plays a role in, and there is no answer, by the way, folks. But discipline plays a role in my life. I went to military school. I went to military school because I was very undisciplined
Mm,
as a child. And the funny thing about the school I went to is that for the first year and a half, really even 2 years, I fought hard against their system, against their way of doing things. I was
really.
convinced that I was just fine doing things my way. And for that, I suffered a lot of heartache. In fact, at the end of my junior year in high school, I had created a school record. This is probably not the kind of record that folks want to create for amassing the most punishment tours in that school's history.
Wow.
Now, for the audience, a punishment tour, so one tour is equal to 1 hour of marching. So you put on your parade uniform and you march around in a circle on the blacktop, or in some cases, we could do work tours. So like you rake the leaves around campus and that's worth a certain amount of hours of marching. There's a nice little trade-off there. But in my junior year alone, I amassed over 300 tours, 300 hours of marching. And at the time, it was really unclear whether I would graduate from that school. But by the end of my junior year, I had not only worked off all of those tours, I'd amassed a leadership role within the company, the company that I was assigned to within the military school.
Hmm.
By the end of my senior year, I graduated as the highest ranking non-commissioned officer in the school.
Wow.
So it was a pretty incredible transformation that that school afforded me. And the only thing that changed is that I stopped fighting the rules.
Hmm.
I stopped thinking that there was an easy way or a shortcut, and I just did the plan. And to your point about telling people that it's discipline that change takes and it's consistency, we can spin our wheels searching for a shortcut, or we can just start to follow the plan. It's not to say you can't blaze your own trail,
Certainly.
but there are enough people out there who have done generally what we'd like to do that we can model ourselves after them, at least to get started. There's a path to follow. And if we follow that path instead of looking for shortcuts, we can build one heck of a foundation. That's a foundation for success.
Do you find that the leaders that you speak to in some of those workshops that some discipline is really needed?
I don't know that I'd say that. Most of the people that I work with are very intelligent,
Hmm.
very capable, and very caring leaders.
Hmm.
But leaders, just like your regular line employee or your entry level, employee, they've got lives outside of work. We've all got, I like to think of a juggler, and they're juggling glass balls and rubber balls at the same time.
Hmm.
Right? We've got all these responsibilities, each of us, that we're juggling at any given point in time. And some of them, you know, a rubber ball, if we let it go, no problem, it'll bounce. We can pick it up or we can catch it again. But trying to keep those glass balls in the air is what many people are focused on. Walking down the street, you know, you try to stop a stranger, and generally it's, I got stuff to do. I don't want to talk. And normally it's because they think you're going to ask them for money, you know,
Hmm.
because that's generally the people that stop you on the street are the people that want money. But we're all so wrapped up in ensuring that we don't drop all the different responsibilities that we're juggling that it's often difficult for us to see when there's an opportunity for efficiency out there. So most of the leaders that I work with, just like the individuals that they lead, they're so busy doing what they're doing, keeping the machine moving, that it takes someone like me helping from the outside to create that efficiency.
Very interesting. And what's another interesting point about you, Greg, is that you're very focused. What seems to be very disciplined. You have this performance agreement. You're disruption expert, but you play piano. You play it very well. You sing very well. Your wife does as well. You had this great video where you hurt yourself in your wedding,
I don't know if
dancing.
that's a great video, but I know what you mean.
And it seems like you also have this kind of very obviously art side, and not that discipline doesn't belong there, but we always say art and science. We always kind of, are they competing? I wonder if you look at that very closely in your life. In your life, do you see yourself more as a scientist or an artist?
Yes.
Both,
You said earlier that you study martial arts, which has nothing to do with business,
right?
and yet at the same time it has everything to do with business.
Yeah.
Music is the same way. Music is a tremendous metaphor when working with businesses and organizations. I mean, I see organizations as an ensemble performance. They're like a choir.
Hmm.
A well-functioning organization is like a phenomenally talented choir. When a phenomenally talented choir is singing, you don't hear 100 voices. You hear one voice. You hear a tremendous blend of beautiful harmonies and sounds. They're not One person isn't over singing or trying to sing so that they stand out from the rest and they're noticed. That's not what a choir does. A choir blends. Sometimes there's a soloist, of course, but generally a choir sings in unison. Same with a well-run organization. There isn't one standout star that's trying to showboat or in a division or in a team. There isn't one person that's just working so that they look great. That's not what a well-functioning team or division or organization is made up of. It's made up of people that are performing in a way so that the person to their left and right can perform better because of that performance. Just like in a choir, when you're singing in a way that blends with the people to the left and right of you so that the sound that's produced, the result of that singing is one voice. That's how well-run organizations conduct themselves.
Hmm.
And there's all sorts. I mean, if you're in sales, we talk about sales cadences. That's cadence is a rhythm, and rhythm is tremendously important in music. In fact, sometimes it's the silence in a piece of music that's the most powerful. Just like in business, sometimes it's
Hmm.
making a statement and then shut up and wait for the other person to talk that creates the desired impact. So I use music because I love it, but also because it's a tremendous metaphor. It takes title out of the equation. You know, if you're sitting in an audience, I don't care if you're an executive vice president of a Fortune 100 company or you just started washing dishes at, name that restaurant. Music is something that speaks to the individual.
Hmm.
And that's, as you can tell from the work that I do, something I'm very passionate about is I don't really care to talk to employees or care to talk to leaders. I want to talk to people because I'm interested in developing people. And I know that if we develop people effectively, if we transform the person, they will transform our business. Any role that person steps into will be better for it because of the development we created for that person. You can't always say that when you're building or training an employee. You can't always say that because Bob's a great accountant. He could step into his role in the community, maybe as a board member or just as an individual you run into on the street. He may not be better because of that accounting training. Rarely is. But when you build up Bob, Bob's always the name for my metaphorical employee. So when you build up Bob as a person, whether it's as a father, as an employee, as a board member, whatever role Bob steps into, because he's better developed as a person, will be better for having him.
Hmm.
Better people are better for business. That's the core belief that I hold in the work that I do.
Yeah, very well said. So, did you ever get that bidet?
Man, you went deep in the videos. I love it. We did.
Good.
We did. The pandemic, I think, sparked a lot of people's interest in bidets when
I did.
toilet paper became hard to come by. And, I hope this isn't just too much information, but it's pretty great. I highly recommend that everybody check out a bidet.
I love it. I love it. As a kid, I spent a lot of time in Italy, and yeah, that they're all there. And it's a great, great video, great little take. I encourage people to look at that. So, Gregory Offner, what motivates you?
Oh my gosh. Helping others. And I know that sounds cliche, but when I was in college, my freshman year, just sort of meeting people, one girl that I met said, so what is it that drives you? And I remember the answer I gave her clearly. I said, I would just like to try and leave every person when I meet them a little bit better than when I found them. And that's really, I believe in what you'd call altruistic utilitarianism.
Hmm.
Me giving of my experience and me helping others. It may seem altruistic. Like
Right.
I'm happy to get on a phone and talk sales with anybody, give them some ideas, and they, oh my God, you're so kind. Well, yes, no, not really. What it is that if I help you become better at sales, then everyone's encounter with you is going to boost their impression of what dealing with a good salesperson is like. And so then when I need to call to see if I can serve their organization, they're more apt to be kind to me because their impression of every salesperson they've run into is that we're ethical, we care about making a difference, and we're there to help. We're not there to try and snag as much money as we can for as little in return as possible.
Mm.
So it's sort of selfish, me wanting to help other people become the best versions of themselves. It means I'll get cut off less in traffic. It means more people will say thank you if we hold the door open for them. It means that more of the people we run into in everyday life will be grateful. They'll be curious, not obstinate. I believe that the work that we're doing can change and transform the world. And I know that that's a big, lofty statement to make. But business is the most powerful tool for transformation on the face of the planet. No NGO, no nonprofit, no government, none of them can do real transformational change better than business can when it's done ethically and consciously. There are some
Mm.
folks out there who aren't doing it the way I would like to see it being done, but when it's done ethically, when it's done consciously, business is the greatest force for transformation on the face of the planet. So if we can go in and partner with businesses, help fully develop their people, those people then in turn focus their efforts, their skills on transforming the business. The business grows, it gets more resources, it has more people that employs, those people get fully developed. We can literally change the world for the better
Hmm.
through this work. And that's what motivates me.
You mentioned traffic. In one of your pieces, you talk about an experience where you're with your wife crossing the street, and somebody was speeding up, and you know, words started exchanging, and kind of got stronger. But then somebody just said, "I'm sorry," and it just came. Everybody came right back down and leveled out. It was a really, really nice antidote.
Yeah, that was an odd circumstance. My wife, Kim was towards the tail end of her pregnancy, so tough to get across the street quickly at that
Yeah.
point. And we were walking across the street to get to our car, and this other car was just zooming
Hmm.
down our street. And I forget what I said, and then she yelled something, stopped the car and yelled something back. And then I think I yelled something, she yelled something more, and I just thought, is this is this really how I want to live my life? Is this what's important to me? Yelling at a stranger?
Right.
And so I said to her, I said, look, I'm sorry. I said, I'm fired up. I'm worried about my wife. We're going to give birth now any day soon. So there's a lot of hormones happening in our house. There's a lot of hormones happening in my brain, I think, too, as I'm getting ready to be a father. I said, no, I'm not here to yell at you. I just want people to be able to cross the street and not worry about getting hit by a car. and she started tearing up,
Right.
and she said, "This isn't me either. I don't yell at people. I'm sorry. I'm having a day." And it was really wild to see how just that shift, just being the one who was willing, and I don't wanna say like, "Well, look at me be the one." She could have been the one, and it would have
Mm,
changed my
mm,
interaction with her too. But it just takes one person, "Hey, you know what? I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted to show up in this exchange. Can we kinda pause and, like, reset?" God, the change that that can have. And that takes being self-aware, which I work on and I need to work on more. I work on it every day. It's a tough skill to develop. But by developing it, by incremental growth, by incremental change, I'm working on myself. At the same time, I'm helping others work on their organization, work on themselves.
mm.
And that really juices me up.
That was a great story. I'm glad you shared that. Only if, we can all take a piece of that and just, every once in a while just say, I was wrong. Just it doesn't hurt. It doesn't
It
hurt to
costs
humiliate.
nothing to say that, and it
Nothing.
buys us everything.
Absolutely. I mentioned that in martial arts. There's no ego. Everybody. It's it's. I really enjoyed that. How do you measure success?
Well, there's a couple different types of success. I think understanding what success we're talking about is important. Financial success, I measure like everybody else does. Dollars in the bank account. Is this financially successful right now? But what I've come to believe is more important is, am I different today than I was yesterday? Am I growing? Am I changing? I'm not out there. What I love about my industry is that I'm not out there trying to beat, I don't have competition.
Hmm.
There are other speakers, they are my colleagues. But if I win a gig and do a good job, that creates opportunity for another speaker the next year.
Hmm.
If another speaker wins a gig and they do a good job, it creates opportunity for me next year. So I see it as not, I need to get mine before somebody else does. I see it as having the opportunity to make the pie bigger for everybody. There is a certain amount of financial success that I need to be able to support my family. Above that would be great. It doesn't motivate me. I'm not saying I wouldn't like to have more money. Sure, that makes things easier. But I don't wake up and go, money, 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 got to get that money, got to get money, got to
Hmm.
get money. I'm not focused on the money. I'm focused on making an impact for others because I know that when I do that effectively, they're more than happy to give me a big pile of money in exchange because the impact I'm making for them helps them make an impact for their customer, for someone else that's willing to give them a pile of money. So it really is a knock on effect.
Hmm.
Help the person to your left and your right so that they perform better and you perform better, just like a choir.
Does everything go back to music for you?
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
I
It's
think
it's your
so. I think
soul,
it's
isn't
what's
it?
governed my life ever since I was little.
Yeah. You see it in all your pieces there when you play, when you sing, and you have this one particular piece where you're singing a Beatles song, and then you make your points, and then you just change it. I think you turn minors all into majors. I think you said, and it just radically changes, the feeling of the song, and it's still the song, but still kind of changes the effect. And you have great content out there, Greg. I really enjoy our time together, man. I look forward to one day having a cup of coffee with you. How can people get in touch with you? Your website, your social media. Please tell anybody who's listening.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. My website is gregoryoffner.com. You can just type in cgregspeak.com. That's another little shortcut to get there. Um, I'm on all the socials. I don't really hang out on Facebook that much, but Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, just type in Gregory Offner Jr. and you'll see me. See this bald, beautiful noggin pop up on the profile picture there.
Certainly, certainly. Offner, Offner, by the way,
Yes.
everyone. Greg, thanks so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I encourage everybody to look at your content, get to know you a little bit more. And again, I look forward to eventual face to face. Greg, be well, and I can't wait to hear more about you and see you grow and help
That's great.
others.
Thanks so much for having me on, Joe. I really appreciate it.
You be well.
You too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.